Patrol says makes this a crisis. Now, I want to show you that new video. These migrants arrive by an express bus direct from Guatemala, hired by the cartels. Then, one by one, man, woman, and child, they duck under a hole in the fence, then single file line up to be arrested by a Border Patrol agent. This is the camera that shot that video. We're in Yuma, 126 miles along the Mexican border. That is a secondary fence. Here is where agents patrol. That is a primary fence, put here in the 1990s. Now, Sunday, 3 p.m., 3 buses from Guatemala show up on the south side, 171, get out and come through this pre-cut hole, turn themselves in to agents. They pay on average about $7,000. Now, already this year, last 5 months, there have been 170 breaches of the fence. In fact, these dates are dates of individual breaches. Apprehensions already double last year. But because they're other than Mexican, 96%, instead of being turned back over within 8 hours, they're at the processing station. The agency is spending $100,000 a month on medical care, food, clothing, diapers. What does it mean? Half the agents who would otherwise be here doing enforcement are instead caring for and processing illegal immigrants back at the station.
We have to feed those people all of the, 3 meals a day. We have to provide them snacks. We provide them juice. We have to provide diapers. We have to provide baby formula. We have to provide hygiene products. So all those things are costing us over $100,000 a month just here in Yuma.
So the point is, some on Capitol Hill say this is not a crisis because agents are arresting fewer people than they did 18 years ago. Agents say that's irrelevant because of the demographic. Also, Sandra and John, some of the kids who are coming over do not actually belong to the parents who claim to be their parents, and we saw hundreds of fake documents yesterday on an ongoing investigation that shows that some of these kids are actually being trafficked. Back to you.
Yeah. William Lajeunesse there at the border. William, thanks.
We need comprehensive immigration reform. If you are in this country now, you must have the right to pay into Social Security, to pay your taxes, to pay into the local school system, and to have a pathway to citizenship.
Those comments from Senator Kirsten Gillibrand raising some eyebrows on the illegal immigration issue. So let's bring in our A-team. Jessica Tarlov is a Fox News contributor. Brian Brenberg.
Did I get fired?
No. You can stay there for another hour. Brian Brenberg, Executive Vice President and Chair of Business and Finance at the King's College in New York. And Guy Benson, political editor of townhall.com, co-host of Benson and Harf, and a Fox News contributor.
Good
Jessica,
morning.
Since I tried to dismiss you, I'll start with you. I'll start with you to make sure.
That's the way to get to go first.
There you go. Kirsten Gillibrand says, illegals should be able to pay taxes and pay into Social Security and all of that sort of thing. Where does this issue stop for Democrats?
Well, it definitely stops at the voting booth. There should be no argument that people who are here illegally should be able to vote in our elections, though there is some discussion about local elections, especially when it pertains to schools. But what Kirsten Gillibrand is speaking to is the larger issue of there are some 11 to 13 million undocumented people in this country who we are not rounding up and shipping back home. And so we need to ensure that they can have good health care, that their kids can go to schools. A lot of these kids are Americans, and paying into Social Security. And I appreciate your honest framing of what she said, because there's a lot flying around about. Kirsten Gillibrand says that illegals should just get Social Security. She's saying pay your fair share, contribute to society, and you will get Social Security when that time comes, just as if you were an American citizen, because you are here and we are not removing you from this country.
I see two people to your right, Jessica, shaking their heads. Brian?
I saw it too, but I was ignoring it.
Well, no, what she's doing here is she's dodging the underlying issue that Americans care about, which is you have a whole bunch of people in the country illegally. Yes, if they were here legally, would we want them to pay into these systems and get the benefits? We would, but the fundamental problem is they're here illegally, and she wants to skirt over that issue. She doesn't want to address it, and she doesn't want to address the fact that it's getting worse because the nature of the illegal immigration is changing, and we're not set up to handle that.
But a majority of Americans favor keeping these people here. They favor giving them some sort of legal status or even a pathway to citizenship.
So I'm totally fine with a pathway to legal status, for sure, but that's not the case right now. And you think it's okay that someone violates our laws, comes into the country illegally, lives here illegally or against our laws, and then gets Social Security benefits. They get to.
Well, they've paid for it,
Yeah,
right?
but-
This is
but
not
they're
just
here-
an entitlement that they're getting.
But it is an entitlement. It's an entitlement program for United States citizens and people who are entitled to it. That's the nature of the word. Are people who are here illegally entitled to these huge programs that already are going insolvent by them?
It is the decent thing if these people are here and they're going to stay here. And as a society, we have decided, or the majority has said, we want them to be able to stay here. You even favor a right to legal status.
Oh, a
pathway to it. That we should ensure that these people who are contributing to society, who are working jobs that many Americans don't want to do, and if they are being responsible and paying taxes in later life, why shouldn't they have those benefits?
That debate will surely continue. And Brian, I know I'm cutting you off, but you can react to this. This is Joe Biden reacting to a debate that is now emerging from Democrats about packing the Supreme Court. Here he is talking about it in 1983. Watch together.
President Roosevelt clearly had the right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. He was legalistically absolutely correct, but it was a bonehead idea. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make, and it put in question, for an entire decade, the independence of the most significant body, including the Congress, in my view, the Supreme Court of the United States of America.
Brian, that idea is being floated by many Democrats running for president.
And he actually got it right. But bonehead is not the right word. Entirely dangerous is the right word here. He's absolutely right on what's happening, threatening to undermine a key institution in our governing system. And you know what? He's going to get beat up mercilessly for having said this in the primaries, because it's just another issue where his party has pulled way to the left of him, and they're going to go back to this and say, this is why you can't run, because you've got it wrong in the Supreme Court.
Sonia Sotomayor and the others appointed by President Obama were approved by Republicans. I mean, they got.
It does happen.
Yeah. But all of a sudden, because there's a Republican in the White House, Democrats seem to be aflame over the prospects of President Trump getting another court appointment.
There have been discussions about the dangers of court packing for a really long time. Surely what happened with Merrick Garland has spurred this discussion. But to what Joe Biden was saying, he's actually in line with what Dianne Feinstein thinks today and Tim Kaine. There are some 2020 hopefuls that are talking this way, but there are a few of them who are certainly not. We haven't heard what Kamala Harris thinks about this. So we'll see how big of an issue it is. But I think it is something that the right really wants to inflame and say this is what's core to our policy positions, when really we're trying to talk about health care and the economy.
You were talking about it. We are reacting
because I got asked a question.
No, I'm saying your party is. We are talking about it because your party is proposing it and seriously indulging it. Many, I think it's up to 6 presidential candidates on the Democratic side are at least indulging or embracing some form of court packing or reforms. We did not invent this out of thin air from the Fox News fever swamp. This is a thing that is happening.
But doesn't it matter that the proposal, actually, we talked about this yesterday, and Outnumbered. It's
one
for
of the
15
proposals.
One of the proposals, but there isn't another one, is 5 liberals, 5 conservatives, and then 5 rotating judges like an appellate court.
FDR also framed his changes as reforms and not court packing, and it wasn't exactly just adding justices the way that it sounds like. And there are more than one proposal. We talked about it on the couch yesterday on Outnumbered. Eric Holder, who is the former Attorney General, who's advising a number of these candidates, he's talked about just sticking 2 more Democratic appointed justices on there next time.
But he's not running for president yet. So from what we are seeing,
does the former Attorney General, like, that matters? That's a voice that we should pay attention to, right?
They're not. It's not that these issues are being indulged. Democratic candidates are leading with this. This is the beginning of the story, and they're leading with this issue. It's not just something we're talking about.
You don't think that Democrats are, if you've watched these town halls, and I understand for people on the right, they're not as interesting as they are for me, but if you watch them, what are the first things they're talking about? Healthcare, the economy, criminal justice reform. And then they get asked questions about this.
Supreme Court.
But you should have policies on everything.
Hold on. So one of those leading candidates running for president on the left is Beto O'Rourke. Newt Gingrich has penned a piece published on FoxNews.com yesterday. You can go read it. Here's the headline: Beto O'Rourke in 2020. I made a lot of assumptions about the candidate, and I was wrong. In that piece, Newt writes, in a field of nearly 20, arm waving and immense self-confidence may not be enough. My hunch is we will look back on the announcement week as the high watermark of the O'Rourke campaign, and then it will be bye-bye Beto. Brian.
My thought bubble here is a boxing match at the beginning when a guy's standing in his corner and he's playing to the crowd and he's got his hands up and he's hooping and hollering. He walks to the middle of the ring, the bell rings, and the heavyweight fighter punches him in the face and he's knocked down. I mean, that's it. Beto O'Rourke is running around the ring, tiring himself out, but when he gets into an actual debate, when somebody challenges him on the left, which is what will happen in the primaries, he will fall because he's got no substance here. This is an aesthetic candidacy, not a substance candidacy.
And I think Karl Rove is way off base here because I don't think Karl has been in a room where Beto gets up on a countertop because it's very powerful.
Hold on, so you're referencing Karl Rove's piece in the Wall Street Journal because we just read Newt Gingrich. Yeah. If you're going to react to that, let's get that in here. Karl rates Mr. O'Rourke seems to suspect he's the smartest man around. To win, Mr. O'Rourke must build a team of smart people and listen to them. That requires leadership and management skills that may be beyond the reach of a punk rock musician turned web services small business founder turned politician unless he changes tack.
As I say, though, has Karl, has Newt, either of them, have they been in the room where he gets up on a table? Because it seems like this is his power.
And what happens?
He waves his arms and he gets sweaty. Look, I think we should not underestimate Beto O'Rourke. He came within 3 points of winning in Texas, which is an awfully hard thing for Democrats to do. Democrats have shown that they like sort of aspirational, young, exciting figures. Does that remind you of anyone that ran for president in 2008 and couldn't win and then did? So, look, he has all sorts of weaknesses. I concede those points from those very smart guys, but I think it's too early to say bye-bye.
And then there's John Hickenlooper, who former governor of Colorado, who wants to was asked whether he would consider putting a woman on the ticket if he is nominated. Here's his response.
How come we're not asking more often the women, would you be willing to put a man on the ticket?
What do you think about that, Jessica?
I think that isn't going to help John Hickenlooper if he's going to be running for the presidency in the Democratic field right now. That might be something that a lot of people are thinking, but it's certainly not something you should be saying out loud and at the town hall. Men have had all the chances here. And
you're advocating dishonesty in politics?
Just being true to the spirit of what's going on here.
Don't say what's on here.
No, I understand where he was coming from, but when you look at how many people are running in the Democratic field and how many people might be, with Joe Biden talking about picking up Stacey Abrams even before he gets in the race, it is clear that Democrats want our ticket to reflect what our party looks like, and we are a diverse party.
God bless these guys for having to walk through the political correctness minefield that these primaries are going to be. I mean, just any little word, you're going to find out where the boundary lies.
It's not just a little word, though. You don't think that women and people of color have been discriminated against in this?
That is not the conversation.
I thought he was making a joke. Was my
I did not.
Jessica, final thoughts.
Maybe I have a bad sense of humor. Maybe if it was a joke, fantastic.
I would never say so.
We will bring the A-team back for more just a bit later on.
A lot of people are asking because they love me and they ask me about a man named John McCain. I have to be honest, I've never liked him much. Hasn't been for me. I've really probably never will.
President Trump criticizing late Arizona Senator John McCain at an event in Ohio yesterday. A growing number of Republicans coming to McCain's defense and urging the president to stand down. Kevin Corke is live at the White House with more. Kevin, good morning.
Sometimes, Sandra, you just got to walk away. That seems to be the message from some Republicans to the president of the United States, who, as you pointed out, was in Lima, Ohio yesterday, and he had a real grand opportunity. He was there to talk about economic security as national security. He had a chance to remind Buckeye Staters it was his policies that helped keep that plant open, the one that makes all the tanks. And to the chagrin of some, if not many, he also used that opportunity to talk about his rocky relationship with the late senator from Arizona.
John McCain received a fake and phony dossier. Do you hear about the dossier? It was paid for by crooked Hillary Clinton, right? And John McCain got it. He got it. And what did he do? Didn't call me. He turned it over to the FBI, hoping to put me in jeopardy. And that's not the nicest thing to do.
He says it's not the nicest thing to do, and there are those even on the right that are saying Mr. President talking about this probably isn't the nicest thing to do either. Here's what Martha McSally tweeted. John McCain is an American hero, and I'm thankful for his life of service and legacy to our country and Arizona. Everyone should give him and his family the respect, admiration, and peace they deserve. And it wasn't just McSally. Others on Capitol Hill felt compelled to rebuke the president for what some thought was out of bounds criticism.
It's deplorable what he said. That's what I called it from the floor of the Senate 7 months ago. It will be deplorable 7 months from now if he says it again, and I will continue to speak out. We should never reduce the service that people give to this country.
Now, I've had a chance to talk to some White House officials off the record. They're being mum about this. They're saying, I let the president speak for himself. Now, also keep this in mind. It was McCain who famously voted against the repeal and replace of Obamacare. That and some other things that maybe the general public is unaware of seems to have really gotten under the president's skin. Still, there are many who feel like maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones. Guys, back to you.
Kevin Corke at the White House. Thank you, Kevin.
Breaking news out of Texas, that massive fire at a chemical plant finally put out, but the danger might be far from over. Why the National Guard is now being called in as authorities.
Charles Payne, host of Making Money over on FBN. Charles, it depends on where you look, what the forecast is for growth for our economy this year, but the Federal Reserve not so optimistic?
Well, less that we're going to grow slower. So I think the optimum word, though, is growth. We are still going to grow. Remember in December, the big headlines were recession, that we were going to retreat or have and not grow. So even though most estimates are for lower growth, particularly against last year, which was the best year in over a decade, that we are going to be slower than that. But, you know, what I thought was really interesting for me to take away from Jay Powell yesterday, which was a huge decision, was that his confidence is centered around the consumer, who's 2/3 of the economy, because wages are going up, confidence is rebounding, the strong growth in jobs, and also people coming back to the labor force. And he made a great distinction between wage inflation and price inflation. There was a time before when people started making more money, that the Fed would throw up speed bumps in our economy. He made a distinction there that tells me, okay, no need to do that. The American people are allowed to have a raise without the Fed interfering. Yeah, I thought that was great.
President Trump has been openly critical of the Fed and Jerome Powell, and saying that they have been too aggressive in raising interest rates. Is this perhaps a response to that, or is this something else?
It's not necessarily a direct response to that, but it is a response to the fact that they were too aggressive. It is a way. It is a mea culpa, and you know, some are saying if they had done this sometime last year, they wouldn't be in this predicament. What he said yesterday was he's got this. There's an amazing frustration on the part of Jay Powell not to actually get some inflation. Now, when people hear inflation, they think it's a bad word, but we love when our paycheck inflates. We love when the value of our home inflates. Yep. So we do like some inflation. He's been very frustrated that this organization that can print money out of thin air hasn't been able to move that higher. And he expressed that yesterday. And unfortunately, you know, he took actions last year that made it even harder to get that kind of inflation that we need, like fatter paychecks, better home prices.
Interesting. Okay, so what we've also heard from the president and his economic team is clearly they are targeting socialism and some of these calls on the left. Here was Larry Kudlow, we all remember, earlier this month.
I think we have to just put it on trial, put socialism on trial, challenge, rebut, put pen and pencil to paper. I got some staggering numbers here, and then just convict it before it destroys America.
But Politico writes this headline, that this is high-level fear-mongering. Trump's economic team drives socialism attack. Departing from wonky tradition, economic aides echoing Trump campaign themes are spotlighting what they call socialism's potentially disastrous impact.
I was shocked when I saw that headline. Maybe I shouldn't have been because it's Politico, but I'm really shocked that they don't think that there's a need to retard the romanticism of socialism, which can only be romanticized by people who've never to live through it, right? So, it's great when you grow up and you live in an upper middle class environment and you start to think, man, you know what, I got it so good, it's not fair, others don't. You're right, but this is perhaps not the way to go about it. Let's not dismantle what made us great in the first place. And I think what's interesting also in the White House's economic report this week, they didn't just go with Venezuela, Cuba, Russia. They also said, listen, it's better in America than it is in Norway as well. So just be very careful. The allure of something that sounds fair against its historic track record, which is an unmitigated disaster to the existence of human beings.
Real quickly, the president on the Chinese tariffs that he says seem to be staying in place for now. Listen.
We have to make sure that if we do the deal with China, that China lives by the deal. Because they've had a lot of problems living by certain deals, and we have to make sure. Now, no president has ever done what I've done with China. China had free reign over our country. We actually rebuilt China in the truest sense of the word. We're taking in billions and billions of dollars right now in tariff money, and for a period of time that will stay.
You know what's interesting about this? Almost everyone on Wall Street, including people who don't like the use of tariffs as a weapon, but started to come around, said now their biggest misgivings is how do we keep China honest no matter what deal they sign? I hadn't thought about this, but when the president mentioned yesterday, hey, let's keep the pressure on even after we sign a deal to keep them honest. I like that idea. I think it's a great idea, and it should answer some questions. Listen, we know China will sign anything if they think they can get away with just simply signing anything.
He wants to hold them accountable. And
just hold them accountable until other mechanisms can be put into place where we can make sure that they honor whatever we agree to.
All right. It's a wait and see still at this point. Charles Payne, we'll see you later on FBN. Thank you.
See you.
In just a matter of hours, President Trump will be taking executive action to protect First Amendment rights on college campuses. This after some conservative activists say they have been silenced. Can the president give a boost to free speech?
Plus, President Trump saying he wants the public to see Robert Mueller's final report, but not without taking
about the National Guard, but we're working to get more on that. But we can tell you that this new shelter-in-place order was just issued early this morning in response to the latest environmental air samples that came back alerting to high levels of a chemical in the air called benzene. It's at unsafe levels, according to health officials. In response, schools have been now canceled. Folks being told to stay indoors. All of this going down in Deer Park, Texas, a suburb of about 33,000 people or so outside of Houston, where just yesterday, crews got all of the flames out. Look at these pictures at the Intercontinental Terminals Company, which is a petrochemical storage facility. But according to local officials, one of the burned tanks is apparently leaking this chemical benzene, a flammable, sweet-smelling liquid widely used in making plastics and resins, and its fumes can be deadly if inhaled in high doses.
Just because the plume has gone away, the fire is out, doesn't mean that our work stops. Our work continues. We continue to monitor what's happening because we are concerned about the health and safety of our community.
Now, new samples are being taken constantly. Emergency officials hope that the wind will pick up later to help disperse the vapors, which is heavier than air, by the way, so it can settle into low-lying areas. Sunday, one tank caught fire at the plant and burned for days, spreading to multiple tanks. Special foam was used to help extinguish the flames. The cause of the initial fire there is under investigation. We're going to stay on top of this and monitor for it. Monitor you. John.
Casey Stiegel in Dallas. Thanks, Casey.
I'm saying to myself, wait a minute. I just won one of the greatest elections of all time in the history of this country, and even you will admit that. And now I have somebody writing a report that never got a vote? It's called the Mueller report. So explain that, because my voters don't get it, and I don't get it. Now, at the same time, let it come out, let people see it.
President Trump calling for transparency in the Mueller investigation, saying the special counsel's report should be released to the public when it's done. Let's bring in our headliner, Saul Weissenberg, former deputy independent counsel and a Fox News contributor. Saul, good morning to you and welcome to America's Newsroom. So before I ask you, thank you for being here. So before I ask you the should it be made public, can it be? Can the entire report be released to the public in its entirety?
Probably not. You have two issues. One, you've got the rule that says you can't reveal grand jury information. That's Rule 6E. For Mueller or Barr to reveal that information, you'll have to have a court order. Number two, there's some national security sensitive information which will probably never be revealed. But other than that, it's really just up to the Attorney General.
You think it should be?
I do think as much as possible should be revealed. I think people are very curious about it. It's taken up almost 2 years now, so I think it's in the public interest for it to be revealed, whatever it shows.
You say, obviously, the Mueller report, the Mueller investigation was built around the idea of looking into Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. You say that it's fair to assume at this point that there is no significant sign of at least criminal collusion or contacts between the Trump campaign and Russia. Why do you say that?
Well, because we would have seen it. Again, collusion is kind of a nothing word. When I say collusion, I mean, as you point out, John, criminal collusion. That is to say, a conspiracy that violates a provision of our criminal code. And I think we would have seen it now in all of the various plea agreements and statements of the offense that go along with plea agreements that have been issued by Bob Mueller and his team. Really, almost all of these have to do with obstruction of justice or lying to the government. If there was a larger case, I believe we would have seen it by this time. So I don't think it's there.
I want to get your take on the debate that is happening right now. Some Democrats running for president are bringing up the idea of packing the Supreme Court. Lawmakers, some of them weighing in. Senator Marco Rubio has penned a piece published on FoxNews.com saying the Supreme Court needs to stay at 9 justices. Dems' court packing plan is all wrong. In that piece, he talks about our institutions suffering a crisis. We should do no further harm. He's going to propose a constitutional amendment that would prevent changing the face of our Supreme Court. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, I'm not in favor of changing the number of justices. I'm not in favor of this court packing plan. As you know, the only time it's ever been tried in American history was by FDR, and it resulted in a crushing blow to him. It really damaged his popularity in a way that he never recovered from until the beginning of the Second World War. But I don't think we need a constitutional amendment. I don't think it's going to happen. We don't need to have a constitutional amendment every time somebody is worried about something. I don't think it's going to pass, so I don't think that's necessary. Could I go back and make one point about the collusion issue that I forgot to make?
Please do.
Here's why I think collusion is so centrally important. Number one, this is the main thing that Bob Mueller was appointed to find out.
Exactly.
And if the collusion narrative by the left, look, if it's there, we want to know about it. But if in fact there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, that's a big thing because it forces the Democrats to look into, if they're intelligent, why they lost. They're telling themselves, too many of them, well, we lost because of improper collusion between Trump and the Russians, not because we didn't have the right message. And so it's allowed them not to look at themselves and say, how the hell did we lose to this guy? But I mean, perhaps we are advocating programs that are far to the left of what mainstream America wants. So I don't think we should just go, the Democrats are going, people in Congress are saying, well, there's not collusion, but there's this, let's go to the next issue, let's go to the campaign finance. But it's actually very, very important.
Many Democrats,
the Trump people did not collude with the Russians to rig the election. I think it's important.
Some Democrats on Capitol Hill, though, or in Congress, have said if they're not satisfied, if they don't like the Mueller report, they're going to keep on going with investigations in Congress. What do you think?
Well, that's their right. They've got a majority in the House, and I'm sure we'll have all kinds of fights, as we always do, between the congressional branch that issues the subpoenas and the executive branch of another party that doesn't want to follow them. We had them under Obama. Remember, the House held Eric Holder in contempt because he didn't provide information that they wanted. That's just part of the glory of American democracy.
Finally, we want to ask you about the president is now set to sign this executive order on campus free speech. Earlier this month, he said he would issue an executive order, quote, requiring colleges and universities to support free speech if they want federal research dollars. Is this a good path to go down for the president and use an executive order?
Well, first of all, there is a tremendous, as you know, a tremendous free speech and due process problem on campuses today. If it's a state campus, you can go in and file suit. And in fact, I think out of the 130 suits filed on due process issues having to do with Title IX, I think the universities have lost every single one, if I'm not mistaken. I was reading that the other day. I'm a little skeptical about executive orders saying basically even to private colleges you'll lose your money if you don't support free speech, only for this reason. I mean, I haven't seen the proposal, so I'd need to look at it. Because you don't want a situation where every time a new party comes in power, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to try to put forth their favorite proposal and threaten to withhold money if you don't follow our new federal regulations. So do we really want to go that route?
We'll hear more from the president on that this afternoon. Saul Weisenberg, a former deputy independent counsel and also a brand new Fox News contributor. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this morning, Saul.
Thank you.
Well, it's no secret Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has taken the Democratic Party by storm, but now one Republican candidate in North Carolina is actually using the freshman Democrat in a new campaign ad. Details next when our A-Team returns for round two.
Plus, another freshman, New York Congressman Max Rose, now apologizing for what he calls anti-Semitic remarks from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
I said that they were anti-Semitic in nature.
Omar, let's bring back in our A-Team. They need no introduction. But Brian is here and Guy is back and Jessica, you're here. And Jessica, I'll get your thoughts on that first.
I think Max Rose has been doing a wonderful job for his constituents. He was out there in front, one of the first people to condemn Representative Omar's comments. He's been consistent on this front. She has apologized. I think that it was a bit of a setback for those who were offended when the bill became the condemning all forms of hate. And I appreciate him being out there in the forefront and just saying it's still not okay with me.
You know, I don't think that Omar and AOC really care how their comments affect someone like Max Rose. They should. I don't think they care how it affects somebody in other parts of the country that have to go back to their constituents and try to explain what's being said at the national level. That's hurting the party. It's helping AOC, might help Omar with her constituency. It's not helping the party.
I wouldn't necessarily call what Omar did a real apology. I think that she's pretty defiant after this whole thing.
The first one was an apology.
Right, but how many anti-Semitic incidents do we need to talk about here when it comes to her? The first one, she apologized. The next one, she was triumphant when they watered down the bill, as you said, or the resolution. Rose doesn't need to apologize to his constituents. She should apologize to his constituents. What he should do is apologize for voting for this resolution after it was watered down and didn't call her out by name.
AOC has become sort of a lightning rod, you might say. She's actually part of a Republican's campaign commercial. There's a special election coming up in North Carolina, and one of the many Republican candidates has this in an ad. Listen.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she has the media, she has the followers, but bless her heart, she has some terrible ideas.
Less than 3 months after taking office, and there she is already starring in a congressional GOP ad.
I never want to hear a Southern woman say "bless his heart" about me because it is such a cutting insult.
Yes.
Herman Cain said it to me on air.
Oh, that's not.
It was real bad.
It's usually
that way.
Bless your heart is sort of like code word for.
Oh, I know what it means.
Not a fan. I think it is completely understandable given new polling. AOC is underwater by double digits nationally, even here in New York State in new polls. She has underdeveloped, economically ruinous ideas, and the media has amplified her and made her into a giant star. So why not point that out and sort of use her as foil?
Yeah.
Right. Giant stars win re-election, Brian.
Yeah, but you know, it's all true. I mean, she's got all these problems and it's easy to use her as a punching bag for politics. But the fact is the GOP needs to have its own ideas. This cannot simply be the election of being against AOC. It can't simply be the election of being against the Green New Deal because the GOP has blown it on really key issues. So if this is all we're going to get, no thank you. I want something beyond simply we don't like AOC.
I I like what Brian Brenberg said. Thanks for that. That's completely correct. I would add that what the GOP is going to do now is they're going to slot AOC in for Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton, who was the boogeyman of the 2016 elections and many before that. I would add that, yes, her favorability is not high by any means, but she is doing incredibly well in questioning key people. And that's how she keeps up these viral clips that are spreading like wildfire through the Now This platform, for instance, and she's doing really an excellent job in that sense. So I think that is tempering the negativity about her.
It got her on the cover of Time magazine.
You do, yeah.
Throw it up there real quick. We got to go, but here it is. April 1st, cover of Time, The Phenom.
Great for AOC. Democrats are thinking, okay, now we get to deal with more of what she said, and I don't know how to do it.
She's not a right-wing phenomenon. The media has built her.
Yep.
Okay, we got to leave it there. Thank you to our E-team.
Thank you.
Two rounds today.
So, is there a new era coming on?
Okay, so the new president is Carol Folt. She's the former chancellor at UNC Chapel Hill. She seems very well qualified. She was unanimously recommended by a board of 23 people. But the former president of USC was not fired over this college admission scandal. He resigned last summer amid two major controversies. One of them had to do with sexual assault allegations against an on-campus gynecologist, and the other one had to do with an investigation into a medical school dean who was accused of smoking meth with a woman who happened to overdose. So couple that in with this college admission scandal. This woman's got a lot of work to do, especially with rebuilding the image of USC.
You know, it's interesting, and now there's just this broader conversation over college and universities in this country and how fair the system really is. USA Today did a poll on where people stand and how they see the system today. Americans on college admissions. Here's how they voted on that. 67% say they unfairly favor the wealthy. 19% say everything's conducted fairly, and 14% don't really know how they feel about it.
Yeah, unfairly favor the wealthy. You know, something that Carol Folt said that caught my eye when she responded, she was asked about the college admission scandal. She said, most of us at universities spend our lives caring about students and admissions and trying to do things fairly. So when you see something like this scandal, you're aghast. Really? Do people on colleges that work for colleges really try and do things fairly? That's a big question here, because now we're learning that if you check the box that says that you aren't going to take financial aid, you are more likely to get in. And then there are things that are done legally, like if you're a legacy student or if your parents write a check and buy a building, you're of course more likely to get in. That's of course legal, but is that really fair? The end result is still the same, where a student who is more qualified isn't getting in.
Meanwhile, this UCLA story and this one of these students whose parents got involved and they made her out to be an MVP soccer player from her high school and some soccer club. She was the captain for 4. She had never played the sport, and she was admitted as a soccer recruit to UCLA in this investigation.
And UCLA is one of the most dominant soccer programs